Hey everybody, I don't know about you, but as you've watched out over the world, the war in Russia and Ukraine is not just isolated to Eastern Europe. It's spread all over the world, and you can see it in market instabilities. You can see it here. People who do not think that that war is affecting you, all you got to do is look at gas prices. You look at your food prices. You see the global change that has happened. But you know something that's also affected investments as well. And I've said all along, legacy precious metals is your navigator. They're the ones that see you through to get to the next level. The good news about this is even with market volatility, market instability, you've got options. And gold prices are rising as investors turn to gold. And gold presents a hedge against this inflation and that protects you against the weakening dollar, which we are seeing. Legacy Precious Metals is the only company I trust to deal with gold and silver and the other precious metals. You need this investment. You need this as part of your portfolio to keep you buffered from what we're seeing in the world, war and volatility in the market. This is where you need to be. Call Legacy Precious Metals today. Be proactive about this. Get on board with it. Call them at 866-528-1903, 866-528-1903, or you can download their free investor's guide at legacypminvestments.com. legacypminvestments.com, your navigator in a volatile world of investments.
Do you want to listen to a podcast?
By who? Georgia GOP Congressman Doug Collins.
How is it?
The greatest thing I have ever heard in my whole life.
I could not believe my ears.
In this house, wherever the rules are disregarded, chaos and mob rule. It has been said today, where is bravery? I'll tell you where bravery is found and courage is found. It's found in this minority who has lived through the last year of nothing but rules being broken, people being put down, questions not being answered, and this majority say, be damned with anything else. We're going to impeach and do whatever we want to do. Why? Because we won an election. I guarantee you, one day you'll be back in the minority and it ain't gonna be that fun.
Hey everybody, it's Doug Collins. Welcome back to the podcast. Glad to have you with us. Today is an exciting day. It's been a big week, several weeks here. We've had a lot of great guests on. Can't think of one more appropriate as we get ready for the best time of the year. It's fall. It's not only football season and college football, pro football. It's hunting, as you well know here on the podcast, but just a lot of great things. But I can't think of one who the last few years has signified more endings of weekends than my next guest, because she was on the sidelines with NFL football. Michelle Tafoya is with me today. I had the privilege of being on her podcast. She's now part of the Salem faculty as well, so to speak, that Seb Gorka talks about. She has her own podcast, and it is just a great time to have you, Michelle, with us. Welcome to the Doug Collins podcast.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for coming on my podcast as well. Someone said they just adored your Southern drawl.
Got that drawl just going. You know, I look, I'm not Chuck Kelly, so at least it was authentic. You know, we get it going. All right. I mean, a lot of people have watched you through the years. You've been one of you were at the top of your profession. I mean, you know, in sideline reporting and sports reporting, it was just a name. And now you've hit the ground running with a podcast, you know, talking about current events. Talk, if you would, just sort of catch us up. I mean, because a lot of people I've talked to, they said, I told them I was going to have you on the podcast, or I was on yours. And they said, wait, isn't she still doing football? Talk to us a little bit about where we're at right now.
You know, it's funny. I was checking out of the grocery store the other day, and the woman checking my groceries said to me, my husband was a huge fan of yours. He passed away. And I said, that's so nice. And she said, are you still doing football? And I said, no, I retired. And she said, that's just not right. That is not right what happened to you. And I said, what happened to me? And she said, yes, this is just wrong. And I said, well, hey, hang on a minute. I chose this. And this had been in the works for several years. So I like to clear up that misconception. I think because of an appearance on The View, where I said maybe some things that some people thought were controversial, and people thought I got pushed out at Sunday Night Football. It is just not the truth. I've been planning on this departure for several years, and the story of how it ended, you know, why it kept getting pushed until this year is too long to tell, Doug. But that's where I am. And the reason I wanted to leave was because I wanted to use my voice for something that I really care about. And it's not to say that I don't care about sports. It gave me a great career. But I'm really concerned about the state of our country, the division in the country, the I'm not sure if it's real or imagined still, how divided we are. I think it's closer to real than imagined, although I don't know. It's sometimes you go to a baseball game or you go to the park and you feel like, I'm getting along great with everyone here. What's the story? So this is why I made this choice. I want to be able to speak when you're on the number one show on television, which was Sunday Night Football. You can't do that without drawing some controversy to the show. And I had too much respect for the people who created and run that show to do that. And so we mutually agreed, let's not, tweet out too much here while you're on the air with us. And then once you're gone, you can just go to town. So I have.
I love it. Michelle, one of the things though that is from the perspective of someone who has done a lot of TV, a lot, on a different perspective. You, of course, being a reporter covering NFL, which we'll get to a little bit, but the idea of going on The View itself. What was that like?
Well, it was a lot like what you might expect. I was on Gutfeld the other night with Harold Ford Jr., who does The Five as well. And he said to me, oh, yeah, I'm on an island every day that I'm on this network. And I said, it's one thing to be on an island with your opinion, but it's another altogether to have the audience against you, and not just the opinions of the hosts against you, but, you don't feel really. They tried. I will give them credit. They tried to make me feel comfortable, but it's difficult to feel comfortable in that role when all the rest of the hosts and the audience are basically booing you. Not necessarily literally, although the audience would, but in this way that, you're meant to, you end up feeling not just like your opinion is different, but that you are inherently kind of a bad person. And, I don't want to go into too many details about what happened behind the scenes, because that happened behind the scenes, but it's not for the faint of heart.
Just got through the podcast, Michelle. You just mentioned something, talking about the fact that, when you felt there at The View and the folks who was listening, it was not a matter of just your opinions. And I think this is one of the things that I'm glad to have you on this my podcast, but your podcast as well, doing this is, when did we lose sight of the fact that a view is what you believe? And now we seem to have been attaching evil to either side if they disagree with what you say. Do you see that more and more happening now? And it's sort of the cancel culture mentality of, it's not that I just disagree with you, I want to take you out and destroy you.
Absolutely. And it's by design, because then people will be less inclined to talk and share their opinions. Although your dog is sharing an opinion right now. And I'm glad I have earphones in, because my dog's sitting here and would bark right back at your dog. So they would have a debate, and who knows who'd get canceled. Canine cancel culture.
There's no telling.
It's really, this is bad. And when I have friends telling me they're afraid to post something on social media, they're afraid. Doug, this is America. You know that better than anybody. You should not be afraid to post your opinions, your thoughts, your point of view. Someone can disagree with it, but this threat of just having the rug pulled out from under you, losing your job, losing your friends, it's crazy. And I've seen it firsthand in my extended family. I've seen it among my friends. I've seen it happen to people. And I don't know how we resist this and get back to normal, except by having people say, you can't cancel me, because I'm not going to allow you to do that to me. And I'm going to stand up and you can say whatever you want. I think there is a growing chorus of voices who want to say, go ahead, try it, see if you can. And they're not going to allow it. I think apologizing for your opinion is something people should avoid at all costs. If you hurt someone's feelings, if you offend someone, that's not all on you. It's them too. When someone gets offended, they're choosing to be offended. They could say, oh, that Doug Collins, whatever, he and I we don't agree. Or they could just shout it from the mountaintop and call all your sponsors and say, this is hurtful and silence is violence and words are violent. And so silence is violence, words are everything's violence. it is so out of control, Doug, that this is a big reason why I decided to step down from one platform and say, I'm going to stand up for all those people who maybe don't feel quite emboldened yet. And I'm going to encourage them.
Did you sense this coming? I mean, and I've sensed this in what you've said and everything else coming out of the NFL, which is so image conscious. I mean, down to the fact you can't even wear a shoe that is not approved, so which I've always thought was the dumbest thing I've ever heard of in my life. But, or a headband. You and I would remember the old, and this started back in the 80s with Jim, was it Mac, quarterback for Chicago.
Yeah. Why am I forgetting his name too? Jim.
Just blanked on his name as well.
Jim. We're gonna get
McMahon.
It between us. McMahon.
Yeah, we'll get it
Jim
eventually.
McMahon. Good Lord. Yeah, Jim McMahon.
He had the headbands on. He put that, and the NFL got all crazy about it. But in working that, were you starting to see that more and more being put into, frankly, the broadcast, more influence on what you were to cover, not to cover? Was that beginning to creep in, or was that still sort of off limits a little bit?
I didn't feel like the league told us what we could or could not broadcast. I never felt that. I think that we made our decisions about what was worth documenting and what wasn't. And, for instance, we'll get to the elephant in the room, which was the kneeling for the anthem. This began and it started to get a lot of attention. And then, of course, then President Trump, or candidate Trump, whenever it was that he started screaming and yelling about it and how he felt about it, it blew things up. But I think the league mishandled it. And I've said this before, with all due respect to the league, there was a knee-jerk reaction to not allow it, or to say, if you don't want to stand for the anthem, stay in the locker room. Well, I believe in freedom of speech, all of it, especially the kind that you hate, because when we start deciding what shouldn't be said, what kind of speech can or cannot be allowed, we are on a very slippery slope. It'll come around to everyone eventually if we allow it. So I just thought they should have let this thing happen organically. Let the guys kneel who wanted to kneel. There were plenty who wanted to stand. Some would stand with their hand on the shoulder of the guy kneeling. Khalil Mack did that. He would kneel, and his quarterback at the time, Derek Carr, would stand next to him and put his hand on his shoulder. So there were lots of demonstrations of unity, even across this. And I think that it should have just been allowed to go the way it was going. If it reached a critical mass at some point that all the teams were just kneeling, well, then maybe you've got an issue, because the public did not like it.
Right.
The public did not like it. And the thing that I think concerned the NFL the most was that they were going to lose viewers. And they did that year. Now, granted, it was an election year, right? So people were there, they were distracted by other things, but people did not like seeing these millionaires, these guys who were playing a game for a living, and it's hard work, and I'm not belittling it, but they're making a small fortune doing it, and kneeling for an anthem that allows in a country that allows them to do all this. Now, I look, go for it. You got freedom of expression, freedom of speech. I disagree with you, but I would defend your right to do it all day long. So it just got to be the point where, to the point where I just think the league could have just sort of breathed, let it happen, and see where it went organically.
Well, I mean, the league had that image, and you saw the decline of attendance. I still have people come up to me to this day when I'll mention NFL. I don't watch that anymore. And it's like, are you not watching it because of these opinions? Are you not watching it because it's no fun anymore? I mean, do we seem to have this much thinner skin? Maybe that's the way to put it, Michelle.
Yeah, I think unfortunately so. I remember being raised to be a resilient, tough kid, to be able to stand on your own 2 feet and tackle whatever comes your way. And these days, look, I have 2 kids in school. I see what goes on, and we've seen it all over the country at every level. They have safe spaces. They have places where kids feel victimized. Why in the hell are we teaching our kids that they are either victim or oppressor? Why are we teaching them that in order to feel safe, they have to go in a special room that is limited to its population? Why are we not, for lack of a better word, arming our kids with the resilience and the power, the inner strength to handle what's out there? Why are we not doing that? Why are we creating a nation? Again, I get back to the, if you don't say anything, you're complicit in the crime, or when you say something that's hurtful. Well, what the hell am I supposed to say? And what about the people who just would kind of choose, they're strong on their own, they've got their own lives, they just want to stay out of the fray, and that you're going to call them out for not taking a side? And oh, by the way, only your side is acceptable. I mean, it is so nuts. And I'm worried. And you know what's interesting, Doug, and I don't know how much you've seen this, but people who come here from countries where there was real oppression, where there was socialism, where there was Marxism, where there was communism, they see it and they're saying, you don't want to go down this path. So why are we?
Well, and that's the part that doesn't make sense. And I was just in, like I said, in his previous time, this is becoming a theme, it seems like, with some of my podcasts this week, is this idea that, we've just had it. And I don't want to, make this, blanket statement. We gotten too good at this in this country, blanket statements. Everybody's one way or the other. I mean, we had a president do it the other night, basically from the platform in what was one of the worst speeches I've ever seen in my life, dividing speeches. But it's this idea that we have it overall a very good country. Okay, I'm an old Air Force guy. I mean, I'm still there. American exceptionalism still means something to me. I mean, we are the best. I make no bones about it. I'm like I'm an SEC fan. I make no bones about it. There is nothing else. But it's amazing that I never understood the argument from those that want to point out every mistake and bring down the U.S. I've always looked at the U.S. as 200 and plus years of screwing up and getting better. It's just who we are. And
that's what life is supposed to be.
Exactly. But why is it this seemingly, it's sort of biblical to me, as the old chaplain in me that said, it says, when the nation of Israel called out to God, they said, give us a king because we want to be like every other nation. Why is it in our country right now that we seem to have a group of people who say, well, we're good. Yeah, we may be good, but we're not good. And look at the other countries. They're okay too. It's like, wait, when did we lose this idea that we've been given a great gift? The very reason you can go off saying that is the country that you have, but yet we're tearing it apart as if we want to be like everybody else.
Well, I think a large part of it stems from whether they're financially elite, educationally elite, and they feel guilty. And, there's that book, White Guilt. It's this notion of, we have it really good here. We do. Not everybody. And there are people struggling. We acknowledge all the imperfections, right? Given all other things, we have it pretty good here. And the people that I hear from the most shouting about how bad America is, or how we stole this or that, or built everything on slavery, are people, a lot of them wealthy, a lot of them well-educated, a lot of them who maybe just aren't facing a struggle anymore. So this is the best adversary they can come up with. I don't know. Maybe that's simplifying it too much. But it seems like every new generation, when I was growing up, you remember Roots, that special, and everyone in America seemed to be watching that. And we all sort of shared this sorrow and guilt about our history together. Okay, but that's not enough. Now, the next generation comes out, they don't know about Roots, or they didn't watch it. So now they've got to have their outpouring and their catharsis. And then that goes. And then the next generation comes out and they learn about it and they say, well, we haven't paid enough of a price yet for this. Let's keep paying. And it's as though they don't see. I think part of what it comes down to is we're not teaching history in a meaningful way in this country anymore. We're teaching it through a certain lens, We're teaching it in a way of, well, we are a patriarchal, white supremacist society. They are looking at history through the lens of the present, which is not the right way to look at history. And now what's troubling me, Doug, so much is when you have the president of the American Historical Association come out and apologize for saying something that maybe was a little offensive to the 1619 Project, when all he was doing was basing his commentary on that project on a lens of actual history. Like, what is happening to history? History is supposed to be this sort of very concrete way of building the layers of a story. And by the way, history goes back further than 1776 and further back than 1619. And so, just a little bit. So this focus on these specific things on which we can build division, which Marxism is all about, it's really troubling. And I just really hope people start opening their eyes and waking up to it and seeing what it is, for what it is.
It is. I heard this the other day, and I wish I could remember. I was sitting here as you were thinking about what you were talking about. Somebody made this statement, and that it was that the biggest mistake we can make is to judge historical figures by today's standard. Not to say that they were not evil, not to say that they were not good, but to you take them in the era in which they're in. You take policies in the era, and it doesn't make them right, it doesn't make them wrong, but you say at this point in this time, this was what was happening. And it's almost like trying to take airplane travel. You and I both been on planes a lot of our adult lives. I can remember flying in the 80s, in the 90s, and it seemed like all the thing they would do is fly into thunderstorms instead of around them. Now, at least they know they got the radars, they fly you around, and it's relatively, good flights. To compare that to flying in the 1920s or the 30s is just, I think we have a perception problem here. And I think that is that everything has to be looked at, as I understand it, as if I have every answer. And I think that's a concern.
Well, it's I spoke to a Professor Mary Graybar the other day, and she wrote a rebuttal to the 1619 Project. And one of the things she said about critical race theory is that it's based on anecdotal, experiential feelings, that kind of stuff, not on the overall sets of data. And so, yes, if you read a Kendi book about how awful certain stories of slave life were, you want to throw up, you want to cry, it breaks your heart. And you think, how do I ever live with us having seen this? Well, let's fast forward to today. I mean, there's evil in the world today. And why we're not focused more on combating what is in front of us rather than what is behind us. We can learn from that. We should learn from that. We have learned from that. And yet, what about combating the evil in the world today? And so this is, look, one of the ways in which I see the view of evil as evolving, which is really scary, is these criminals who kill someone, they don't pay an adequate price, or they beat someone up on the street or throw a woman down the stairs, and they're out of jail within 24 hours. These people are not fit to be on the streets of New York City or Chicago or anywhere else. And yet we're making excuses for them. We're making excuses for the evil of today, or maybe the mentally ill, and saying, well, we got to give them another chance. But God, heaven forbid you did something 100 years ago, 200 years ago. You get no redemption, and no good that you did in your life can compensate for the bad. I had someone tell me that all the Winston Churchill statues in England, in the UK, and Great Britain should be taken down because they believe he was a racist. Well, Winston Churchill happens to be the most revered man today in the United Kingdom still, for what he did, for having a spine against Hitler. But no, take his statues down. He does not deserve this praise.
Well, it's interesting. I have a theory on that. I think one of the reasons why you see so much what I call the battling of the decades of past, as opposed to dealing with the inequality and evil that we see today, is actually, if you tried to do it today, means you actually have to do something. If you're talking about it in the past, it's theoretical. Well, I mean, I just pontificated wildly about the sins of Grover Cleveland.
Yes.
Who cares? Why don't you go out and look at the problems in our border, the problems in our inner cities, the problem with mayor in Chicago who only wants to dramatize the problems in the south side of Chicago, but yet won't get in there with police presence to actually clean it up. I mean, that actually requires work, Michelle.
You're onto that. It's easier. It's so than to get in there and do something about it. And that's honestly so much of what was churning inside me when I said, I'm going to step down from arguably the greatest job I've ever had in my life, sideline reporter on the number one show on television, because I can't stand by anymore. I've got to do something. Now, I sit and pontificate? Yeah, I do. But what I'm trying to do is make people aware of other stories out there, other people, and behind the scenes, what people don't know is my involvement in some of these organizations and actual the doing of stuff. You're putting yourself out there for all the criticism, which life could have been really easy on the sidelines, even when it was 2 degrees in Green Bay. That's easier. That's easier than taking the flack that I take. But it's not, to me. I had to do something productive to try to change the course of things here. I'm one person, but if you don't believe one person can make any change, then you might as well give up. And I'm just not ready to give up.
Exactly. I think the thing that values most in life is doing something that you value and that is something that is a passion and burning to you. And I think that's the thing that that drives us. And I think we've gotten away from that. We like to live. We want everything easy. I made this comment the other day concerning, the fact of, life is hard. And it seems like we forgot that lesson. Okay. Life is just hard. Life's not fair. And it was never meant to be. Get over it. Shut up. It's just not. Okay. And I'm tired of the participation trophies. I'm tired of everybody, let's all bring down to the happy medium. And we do it in education. We do it in college. We do it in everywhere else. The bell curve does not exist, frankly, in many educational settings anymore. It's flatlined. It's just, we just don't worry about it anymore. And I think that's where we're at, and gives you a voice as we go. Your podcast is hitting on that. And I think that it is something we need. We also need, and in a transition, from you, as you just described it, the greatest job in the world as you had, where a lot of people got to know you and gave you, and really has gave you this platform, which I'm so glad to see you using. As you look back over your time in that, what was one of the things, an interesting, from the last 20 something years, plus years, 30 years almost, what was one of the things you learned from the sidelines or from the reporting side of sports that has impacted you? Sort of one of those lessons. It may not have been in a book. It may not have been something that just hit you overnight, but over time you say, this is what I've learned.
Yeah. Oh, so much. I learned so much. I learned about what it means to be part of a team and choosing your spots. I was sort of like a kicker. I had to come in moments when it mattered, and gosh, that ball better go through the uprights, or you're going to be the GOAT, and not the Tom Brady kind of GOAT, the other kind of GOAT. So it in a way, like an offensive lineman, do no harm. Al and Chris were the stars. The game was the star. I had a role, and I accepted that role. There were times where I was frustrated. I didn't get as much airtime as I wanted, or I had this great nugget story I wanted to get. I wanted to get this story in so bad, and it never made air because why? Because it didn't fit in the moment. We never forced things in. It wasn't about me. It was about the team. It was about the game. It was about the overall product. I think that's something that people have to learn. It's been really fun, therefore, watching my son go from really having no role on his varsity football team last year to having a significant role this year, and the joy he's getting out of that, and how it's it's growing him, and that he still keeps going back even when there's frustration. So I mean, I think that was a big lesson. I think also when a wide receiver gets picked off, or when a defensive back comes up with an interception or fails to come up with an interception, you hear cornerbacks use this term a lot, Doug. They say, I'm on an island out there. Because, your D-line, they're a group. Your linebackers are there. But your defensive backs are kind of spread out, and they're on their own little islands. I was on an island, too. And if you make a mistake on that island, you're exposed. There's no, it's not like you can point to the defensive tackle and it was his fault or anything else, or a holding call. You're exposed. And that's how it feels. And the best way to deal with that is to have a short memory. And I learned that from players. You've got to let the mistakes go hard. It's really, really, really hard. But you've got to just practice and practice and practice and practice and practice until you're able to do it. And even if that means faking that you're forgetting about it, I got to move on. I got to move on. I got to go with what's next. And so those are a couple that I learned. And listen, none of it comes like that. All of it is a process. It's all about layering your lessons until you become really strong and really well skilled.
Yeah, and look, you got to the point where you learned those lessons. You're really good. Interesting. I got to get just on interesting life. I know travel was a lot with that job, and now that you're able to have family time. But a curious question. Speaking of that, I think some hot takes here, because you were on the sidelines. You got to know, at least through the reporting, what's up with the Tom Brady deal this year? I mean, he takes 2 weeks off. I mean, everybody's saying that, Giselle told him he had to spend time with the kids. I mean, is this just Tom being Tom?
Well, it depends on which Tom we're talking about. Tom is an incredible competitor. But, over the years, we would ask him, and we covered the Patriots a ton. And we have what we call production meetings, a couple days before the game or the night before the game, depending on if the team was home or on the road. We'd sit, Al, Chris, and I, our producer director, we'd sit in a room with Bill Belichick for a while, then Tom Brady for a while, then, maybe a defensive player for a while. And you get this opportunity to really ask your own questions to make your broadcast unique. And just about every year for the past 5 years, we'd say, so Tom, someone would say, what do you think? How much longer? And he'd always bring up his family and his wife, and that his wife really wanted him to spend more time. I don't think that was any secret. It was out there. Look, he's 45 now, and she's been holding down the fort. Now we can all accept that they've probably got a lot of help at home, but who knows? I mean, look, she's a very involved mom. I've seen it when she brings the kids to the Super Bowl. Having said that, this whole time you're saying, okay, so Tom, when are you going to wrap it up here? When are we going to? It surprised me. It didn't surprise me that Tom retired. It shocked me that he went back. It shocked me because I thought once he made the decision, that was a done deal. And there was no way he was going to turn his back on that decision. So I was really surprised that he decided to go back. And my hunch is maybe his wife was too. And look, there are a lot of rumors out there. That seems to be the consensus. But that's the background I can tell you about that relationship.
Exactly. After 34 years of marriage to the woman who still absolutely takes my breath away, he had that look in a couple of interviews after he came back, as if, yeah, I'm here, but I didn't talk to somebody and I got to go home. Oops, I got to go tell. For my case, I got to go tell Lisa that. Honey, I made this decision, and I get that look like, well, it's your decision. You're gonna have to live with it. It's like,
yeah, exactly. Own it, baby.
Own it. All right.
But I think she has really wanted his presence.
Well, I can understand.
So we'll see what happens.
I think it surprised a lot of people he came back, especially to a team in which it doesn't, frankly, seem like. I mean, I'm a observer watching it. You've been a closer observer. I mean, the chemistry's there, but Gronk, left. I mean, it's just like, why did, there's a lot of people out there sort of scratching their head because he doesn't seem to like it. I mean, that's, there's all those rumors about the coach and everything else. So,
well, and that's why Bruce Arians stepped out of the coaching position. And so who knows what's really all the inner workings. We can guess and guess and guess. I no longer have contact with the team. So, I trust me with any information, but, it's an interesting development, and it'll be really, I think, sad for a lot of people if it doesn't go well for the Buccaneers this year.
yeah, I can see that. Speaking of another hallucinogenic trip,
I've never been on one of those.
You've covered Aaron. Another one that you had. I mean, you were in Lambeau as much as you probably were in, up in Foxborough. So, I mean, one of the sure things, though, I knew you didn't have to come to Atlanta very often because, frankly, nobody cared. For the most part. And but Aaron Rodgers, the revelation of him taking time off to go to the mind-freeing altering. I'm trying to put this in proper perspective.
Yeah, I don't even know how to pronounce half of it, so don't ask me.
Mescaline, whatever. I don't even know what it is. Go and get hot. I mean, I've heard of comedians doing this. It's like really weird, but did that really surprise you?
Nothing surprises me. Aaron is one of the smartest, most interesting, creative minds I've met in or out of the NFL. He is willing to try a lot of things. And as we learned during the whole COVID thing, not necessarily one who likes to put his body at risk with stuff he doesn't know enough about. I remember he was recovering from a surgery and he didn't want to go through metal detectors at the airport because he was told that some of that radiation could impact his progress from surgery. So Aaron is very wary of and very curious and very studious about these things, and he makes his decisions. So nothing surprises me about Aaron. I've had nothing but great interactions with Aaron. He sat for a piece that I wrote for Artful Living magazine and gave me a lot of stuff. This was back when he was still with Danica Patrick, and revealed a lot of things to me about their relationship that he had never revealed before. Aaron, and I've known Aaron since he was a rookie. So no, I'm not surprised. And again, this is a man who is so focused. He's a curious guy. He's just always looking for new ways to get better, change things. I'm a big believer in we are born with a massive amount of potential. How do we maximize it before we leave this earth? And I think he's just constantly reminding us of ways to do it. So I love Aaron.
I mean, and who else could show up into preseason camp in a Nicolas Cage lookalike? Okay, give me a break. You got to love that. Moving on, one of the hardest interviews it seems to me to do, and someone who does a lot of interviews and now in podcasting has to conduct interviews, would seem to be the at halftime, coming out of halftime coaches quick 2 questions. You did it very well in that. Give me the worst coach to deal with, the best coach to deal with.
Well, I had a really interesting. Yeah. So here's the thing. On Sunday Night Football, we did ours off camera. So I would run into the locker room at the end of the game, at the end of the half, generally with the coach who was the home field coach, or maybe it was the away coach. It really depended. It depended. And I would get this quick, and some of them were great. Some of them would stop and actually talk. Some of them were like, keep up, run, let's go. And some of them would give you great stuff. Mike Zimmer was one of those. Some of them would just kind of dance around the edges. I had a really interesting experience with Jim Harbaugh when he was with the 49ers.
How many stories? Wait, Michelle. How many stories in life have ever started with? I had an interesting story with Jim Harbaugh.
Interesting is one word. It was not pleasant, and he and I had to have a come to Jesus phone call one time because he misrepresented something that I said on the air. There were a lot of interesting stories with Jim Harbaugh. Happy for him. He's having success at Michigan. His brother, John, was a very different story. He and I got along phenomenally well. Love John Harbaugh. And I don't dislike Jim. He wasn't as kind in those moments as many coaches were. So I'm telling you that, knowing that he may never speak to me again, and that's okay, Jim, because I don't know that we'll have really a reason to talk again. But I mean, he made it very, very challenging. I mentioned Mike Zimmer. Look, there were so many coaches that were just awesome. Andy Reid, while he may not have given me a lot at halftime, that man was one of the most strong supporters of my career of any NFL coach there ever was, behind the scenes. I get a little emotional even thinking about it, because he didn't have to do it. He didn't have to be.
Those are the most important people in your life, the ones that take a time and touch your life and didn't have to. And they did. Chan Gailey, former coach of the Cowboys, was a good friend of this. He's a good friend of mine. He's a good friend of the podcast. He's been on a couple times. We get him on to give interviews. Chan is always funny in that regard. He's sort of one of those coaches, and I don't know how much dealings you had with Chan when he was with the Cowboys or with Bubba. Interesting guy, just an old country boy from North Georgia and South Georgia. And but it just shows you that there's real people behind these coaches' positions. There's real people there.
There really are. And Andy Reid and Tony Dungy each went through a son who died. Tony's a dear friend of mine. Tony Dungy played at the University of Minnesota for my father-in-law, my late father-in-law, who was a coach at the University of Minnesota. They knew each other before I even knew my future husband. So it all came full circle for Tony and me, and we're still very good friends. He's an amazing man. I would put Jason Garrett, who's now an announcer, one of the top human beings on the planet. And people love to slam him because look, you're the Dallas Cowboys coach. That's a hot seat, right? And there were ups and downs. There's no better man than Jason Garrett. So, Mike Tomlin, God, I just can't forget Mike Tomlin. I adore this guy for so many reasons. But when you're looking for an example of leadership, all these guys are leaders. I'd probably follow Mike Tomlin off of a cliff. He is that powerful as of a speaker. He is that wise of a person. I just love him.
I've always thought that
Tom Coughlin.
Yeah. I mean,
Tom Coughlin was another one. I could go on and on. I love Bruce Arians. Sorry, Tom Brady. I love Bruce Arians. There we go. Okay, I'll stop.
A curious question. You've led me to one last one. A lot of the ones you just mentioned are what I would consider older school. Okay. The older school coaches, and not to dismiss, and I don't think you are dismissing. What do you think about this younger crop of coaches that seem to, they don't follow it as well?
Well, it's a trend, and look who just led the Rams to the Super Bowl, right? So these guys, there's an interesting dynamic happening here. A lot of these younger guys, whether it's a relatability they have because they're closer in age with the players, I'm not sure what's going on, but it's really interesting to watch. It's really interesting to watch this sort of almost teammate to teammate relationship between a coach and a quarterback, like there is in Los Angeles. And I could say these guys, the guys from Sean McVay, isn't he? I don't even think he's 40 yet. And he has a coaching tree, right? He's set up all these guys. So there is something going on here that is really interesting. And again, I'm not players must respect their coaches, and coaches have to respect their players. There's got to be a mutual understanding there. And in the old school Tom Coughlin way, which I love the guy, it was, hey, and Vince Lombardi time was, you show up 10 minutes early. That's on time. You don't show up at noon. You show up at 11:50 or you're late. So that kind of stuff is the old school. This new school it's different. It's still demanding, but I think it's a little more collaborative, and it's really interesting to watch. And it seems to be working in a lot of places.
Well, and I think that is, the last question. And folks, believe me, Michelle and we've hit it. We've been great. We've enjoyed talking. We're going to be on. We've agreed we probably need to do these regularly, both on me on her show and her on my show, and who knows what we'll team up with as we go along. I've told this on the podcast, told it on the radio show before. My kids went to Georgia. I grew up 40 miles. I represented the University of Georgia. but my granddad was in Alabama. He loved Bear Bryant. So I grew up with both. As long as Georgia and Alabama are doing good, and then when they play each other, I'm Georgia. But, life is happy. But your last game was the Super Bowl this past year on the sidelines, in which Matthew Stafford, quarterback from Georgia, had went to Detroit, labored for years. And could you have thought of a better sort of scenario story for your last game on the sideline to watch Stafford sort of come full circle? I mean, to me, that was just an interesting story. A lot around it. But from what I have gathered, he seems to be a straight-up guy, him and his wife and his family. And to have that kind of success, ending your time on the sidelines with that Super Bowl, was that an interesting time?
It was. And, for all of my experiences with Matthew Stafford have been very, very good. And again, I talk about that success between coach and player. And he and Sean McVay really had a connection that was interesting, finishing each other's sentences. It just worked. The other part of that story that I love that you may not care about, though, is Andrew Whitworth, who was their left tackle, who had struggled with injuries throughout his career, ends up getting named Walter Payton Man of the Year 2 nights before the Super Bowl, or maybe been the night before. And then this is his final game, and he goes off into the sunset. He is another straight up awesome human being. There are so many good guys in the NFL that, and we all love to focus on the Marshawn Lynches and the stories of guys that kind of run into trouble or this and that. There are so many good guys in the NFL. Whitworth is one of the best. And Stafford's a great dude. And yeah, so watching that for him and knowing all that he went through in Detroit and just the frustration and it felt like he was just beating his head against the wall. I love the AT&T commercial he ended up doing where, he talked about trading in his phone, even though he'd had it for 12 years and loved every minute of it. It was terrific. Yeah, it was a great Super Bowl. It's etched in my memory for sure, because I knew it was the last time I'd ever be on a field like that.
That's pretty cool. Before we get going, in your own words, tell us about your podcast.
Well, it's called Sideline Sanity because I used to be a sideline reporter.
You spent a lot of time there, Michelle. I'm telling you.
I did. We wanted to make that connection for people. But the sanity part is much like this conversation, just have sane conversations. And I'd like to amplify people who are really smart, interesting, wise people with really good intentions. And that may seem boring to some, but I had a guy on recently named Zuby. He's a rapper. He's got like 1 million followers on Twitter, and yet a lot of people have never heard of him. He's one of the most brilliant, interesting humans I've ever come into contact with. I had a woman stop me at the park the other day and she said, "Thanks for introducing me to Zuby." So if I can amplify voices like that or perspectives like that are sane and rooted in logic and fact, that's what I want to do. So please go check out Sideline Sanity.
If you've not checked out Sideline Sanity, you need to. Michelle Tafoya I've enjoyed the past month or so, she and I getting to know each other, sharing our podcast, not only here on the Doug Collins podcast, but Sideline Sanity. You'll see here on my podcast, you'll see on her podcast, we'll see more of each other as we share. I mean, it's interesting, 2 different backgrounds coming to the same conclusions in life. Me coming out of politics. Yeah.
It can happen.
You never know. Here it all is as we get it. Michelle, thanks for being on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey everybody, MyPillow. I just wanted to let you know MyPillow is having the biggest sheet sale of the year. You'll have to help. You have all helped build MyPillow into an amazing company that it is today. And now Mike Lindell, the inventor and CEO, wants to give back exclusively to his listeners. The Percale bed sheet set is available in a variety of colors and sizes, and they're all on sale. For example, the queen size is regularly priced at $89.98, but it is now only $39.98 with our listener promo code. Order now because when they're gone, they're gone. You're not going to be able to get it. These Percale sheets are breathable. They have cool, crisp feel. They come with a 10-year warranty, 60-day money-back guarantee. Don't miss out on this incredible offer. There's a limited supply, so be sure to order now. Call 1-800 800-986-3994. Use the promo code Collins, Collins, or you can go to mypillow.com, click on the radio listener square, and use the promo code Collins, Collins. Lisa and I sleep on these sheets every night. You will want to have them as well. They're a wonderful product. Go right now, either 800-986-3994, code word Collins, or go to mypillow.com. Also use the code word Collins to get this discount. You will not regret it.